Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our radiator. To start, let's go ahead and get under the truck and drain the coolant. Just as a quick note, anytime you're doing any service on your cooling system, it's a good idea to make sure that you flush out your existing coolant and replace it all with brand new coolant by the time you're done. Now typically underneath the front of your truck, you're going to have a couple skid shields under here. One across right there and then one across right here. Our truck doesn't particularly have one, but go ahead and remove all the mounting bolts that hold up the shields if you have them. Now underneath the driver's side of the truck, you're going to be able to find the petcock on your radiator. You're going to want to make sure that you have a bucket underneath this so you can collect all the fluid and recycle it. Let's go ahead and turn this counterclockwise and start draining the coolant. Under the hood, we're going to go ahead and open up our radiator cap. There we are. While that continues draining, let's go ahead and take off the engine cover as well and this hose. And then we're going to come over here and relieve this hose clamp as well. Set this aside. Now down along the front of the engine, the next thing that we want to do is relieve tension from the serpentine belt. You're going to be able to find the serpentine belt tensioner on the passenger side. We'll go ahead and lift up on this, and then we can remove the belt from the pulley. Once that's off, go ahead and relieve the tension here. We'll get our tool out of the way. Now that the belt has plenty of slack, we can take it off of the pulleys so we don't get any coolant on it. There we are. That's plenty out of the way now. Next thing we're going to do is continue on to removing the bolts and nuts that hold the fan to the water pump. To do this, it's going to be easiest using a wrench and of course a screwdriver or a pry bar. The reason why I want the screwdriver or pry bar is because as we try to loosen this, it's going to end up spinning the water pump. So if I just put the screwdriver or pry bar right behind here, that's going to hold this for me and I can start loosening up my mounting hardware. It's nice and loose. We'll just get this off of here and we'll finish removing all of them. Now what you're probably going to notice as you start removing the hardware is that a lot of the studs that go into the water pump come out with the nut. If that's the case, you're probably going to have a hard time getting that last one out because of course it's going to be very difficult to be able to hold on to anything to be able to get it to stop spinning. I'm just going to take one of the studs, I'll start it in there so I can still grip onto it, and then I'll remove the last nut. Okay, so now I have all the mounting hardware out of the way, except for one of them. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and break the fan free from the water pump. There we are. The next thing we're going to do is move along to removing the fan shroud from the radiator. To do that, I'm going to remove both of my mounting bolts up along the top right here. With the fan shroud loose as well, let's continue on to removing our last bolt on the fan right here, and then remove the fan with the shroud at the same time. Next, we're going to remove our lower radiator hose from the radiator. Loosen the clamp and slide the hose off the radiator. Now I'm just going to use a hose pick and try to break this free from the radiator. Once it's broken free, make sure you have a collection bucket underneath it. More than likely some coolant will come out. On the front passenger side, we're going to continue on to removing this bolt right here. So now follow that along to the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and remove the lower bolt as well. Now at this point, we can wiggle this around a little bit more, and we'll have more access to be able to remove one of our mounting bolts for the radiator. Okay, so now at this point, we're going to continue on to removing our mounting bolts that hold the radiator to the actual body. You're going to find mounting hardware inside here. And then if you move your way right down inside this area, you'll be able to find a hole that has another mounting hardware. On the other side, it's going to be all the same, except this one's going to be directly behind this area. So the bolt's going to be located right inside here. If you wanted to, you can reach from along this area here to be able to remove the bolt once you get it out. All right, let's do the same to the rest. With all those bolts out of there, let's go ahead and carefully lift up our radiator and slide it right up and out of the engine compartment. There it is, friends. Okay friends, it's time to install our brand new radiator. Pay attention to where the hoses are going to be. You want to make sure that that's facing in towards the engine. Slide it right over this. You want to be very careful not to damage your cooling fins on the radiator as you slide this down. Slide it into position and then we'll start in all of our mounting bolts. Okay, just going to slide this through. Line it up with the hole. We'll go ahead and start it in, just a few threads, then we'll do the same for the rest. Once we have them all started, we'll snug them up. Okay, now that we have them all started, let's go ahead and snug them up. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and mount this back to the body. Pay attention to this little hooky-doo here. That needs to slide into the slot. So we're just going to go ahead and lift this up a little bit, slide it down and in, line up our bolt holes, and then we'll start in our 2 bolts. You'll notice that your 2 bolts are 2 different sizes. The shorter one is for the top. The longer one, of course, is going to go through the bottom, which has to go through a bushing. Start them both in, then snug them up. Now at this point, we're going to put in our fan and our shroud. Pay attention on the bottom of the fan shroud. We've got these little pitons right across here. You need to make sure that they fit in down along the radiator at the bottom. All right, we're just going to slide this down. Just be very careful not to damage the fins on your radiator. There. Let's get this fin onto where it belongs. All right, that's started. Now let's go ahead and install the hardware for our fan. Okay, so now we're just going to double check to make sure that the lower half of the fan shroud is attached to the radiator. Just give it a little wiggle, make sure that it's not falling off down along the bottom. After that, go ahead and squeeze in the top, start in both of your bolts, and then snug them up. Give that a nice wiggle, make sure it's secure. Just going to grab this wiring, slide it up along the top area here. We'll grab our overflow hose. Perfect. Let's connect in our upper radiator hose to the radiator. Make sure you slide it all the way up to this area here. Once it's up, go ahead and secure it. Tighten up the clamp here. Make sure that's nice and tight. Now it's going to be time to install our serpentine belt. Go ahead and follow the diagram provided. Now we're just going to go ahead and put pressure on this tensioner. That way there we can slide the belt over all the pulleys. Okay, so now that I have the belt over all my pulleys, I just want to double check to make sure it's sitting into the grooves. A lot of the pulleys are going to have grooves on them where the belt's supposed to sit. Other pulleys are going to be flat and smooth. That's where the back of the belt's going to be. Make sure it's sitting inside the grooves. Once you're sure it looks good, let's continue on. Back underneath the truck, let's go ahead and get our lower radiator hose back on there. Push it all the way down so it bottoms out with the radiator. And then we'll snug it up. Make sure the clamp is sitting flush. And then make sure it's nice and tight. Underneath the truck, make sure you double check. You want that petcock to be nice and tight. Okay, so now that we have the hose nice and tight, let's go ahead and put up our shields, assuming you have some. Let's get our engine cover back on there. You'll notice on the back side of it, you've got a couple little hooky-doos. Those need to place onto this area on the back side of the engine. Line them up, slide this down. It should fit onto the little pitons. Give it a couple loving bonks, and then make sure it's secured. Now it's going to be time to go ahead and fill up our cooling system. Typically when you do this, you're going to want to use something that looks like this, which is a funnel. The reason why I want to do that is because there's going to be a lot of air inside the cooling system, and we need to make sure we get it all out of there. So what I'm going to continue on by doing is filling up this funnel right here, so it's approximately 3/4 of the way, and we're going to let it burp its way down and continue filling along the way. Once it seems as though it's burped out all the air that seems like it's in the system, you're going to go ahead and start up the truck and run it for a little while with the heat on hot. That's going to help open up that thermostat and help the circulation flow. Once that happens, you're probably going to notice that there's a lot more air bubbles coming out of here, so just keep making sure that you top it off along the way. Now the coolant that I'm using inside this is universal coolant, so you might notice that it's a different color than what you might normally see. Okay, so I ran this, I got out all the air bubbles that I can. I'm just going to continue on by closing this off. We'll pull this up and out of here, and we're going to put the rest right into our overflow container. Let's fill up the overflow container so it looks like it's at the maximum line. Okay, let's get this cap on here, and of course our radiator cap on the radiator. All right, last couple things, just go ahead and start it up. You want to make sure that your temperature stays inside the normal range. Aside from that, go ahead and take it for a road test.